Welcome everyone, Byron White here, the host of the Writer Access Content Marketing webinar, which is now on our 69th series, I guess you could say. And I'm joined here with Neil Schaefer. Neil, welcome.
Thank you very much, Byron. It's an honor.
Honor, wow, that's a really powerful word. That may be too powerful for this webinar, but it's an honor for us to be here with you as well. We're very excited to learn much from you about a super hot topic, namely proven social media tactics to amplify your content marketing. You're, of course, also the author of Maximize Your Social. You also are a serial speaker, I guess might be an interesting way to describe that, and the author of 3 books, in fact, and it's going to be really exciting to learn from you today, and we appreciate your time and your interest in our audience. So without further ado, I'm going to just go over a couple little housekeeping rules here to walk you through what's about to happen and what access you'll have to the information, and then we'll dive in with a poll. And then we'll learn a little bit more about both Neil and myself for those of you that might be new to our audience, which, by the way, this particular webinar was really successful, probably thanks to Neil's help and as well as our social media efforts and bringing in a lot of new people from social media. So for those of you that are not real familiar, we'll tell you a little bit about what we're all about here in our efforts to educate and acclimate the world to what's happening with content marketing. We actually, the webinar itself goes back to 2009. I was just looking, Neil, at the title of our first webinar we ran called "What is Content Marketing?" so I thought you'd find that quite interesting as we've come a long way since those early days of discovery, shall we say. But the webinar is being recorded. Thankfully, we've gotten permission from Neil to showcase this for future learners, and you'll be getting a link to the recording, everybody that is registered, as well as a brief synopsis of the slides, not the full deck that you're about to see, which would probably take several terabytes of data for you to download. So we're going to try to squeeze in some Q&A in the end. I will have my normal 400 questions that I would like to ask Neil, but I'll interweave those with your questions. I actually ran a podcast with Neil, and we've gotten to know one another over some time, and I'm super happy and pleased to announce that Neil, of course, is speaking at Content Marketing Conference this year as well. So we'll be hearing more from Neil in 2016, which is very exciting for me and the fans and the attendees of this webinar. So right on, as the expression goes. If you happen to want to show us some love, please throw some tweets out with the pound right on as sort of our symbol of communication that we use to connect lots of dots. So feel free to carry away with that. Let me tell you a little bit about myself on the next slide here. So I'm one of the I guess I don't know what I would call myself, a dinosaur probably when it comes to content marketing. I began as an agency back in 2005 and ran an agency servicing about 100 customers per year, companies like Walmart, the company store Brookstone, FTD, Salesforce, and helping them with creating lots of content. We developed some technology that helped track the impact of that content. We had a really good run, but we wanted to do something a little bit more scalable and a little bit bigger to try to make the world a better place. So we launched Writer Access with a mission to bring great content to on a much larger scale. And we've gone from 100 customers to now 18,000 customers at Writer Access, completely bootstrapped with no VC funding and just organic growth, basically, or like I say, growing the business organically, the content marketing way. So that's sort of my story. I also am the chair of Content Marketing Conference coming up in May. We've got 30 speakers queued up, Neil, of course, included. We're very excited. We'll have some announcements of keynotes coming up, which I am so excited about. I can hardly stand it. But it's going to be a really great event this year, bigger than last year, double the size. Very excited about that. But let's hear from Neil. Enough of me. Neil, tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm actually going to go into more details when I begin my presentation. But for those of you that are just new here, I am the founder of a social media blog called Maximize Social Business, the author of Maximize Your Social. Most importantly, I am a big fan of Writer Access. Disclaimer, I am a customer of Writer Access. I've been a customer for a few years now. They provided excellent help and expertise in improving the quality of not only my blog posts, but actually my ebooks as well. So, I'm not getting paid to be on this webinar, but I just wanted people to know that I am what you would consider a brand advocate, and that's going to be an important thing I'll be talking about later on in this webinar. So I'm going to end my introduction with that, Byron.
Lucky us to have you both today and as a customer. Thanks for that. Skip over to the next slide there, and here's the poll question that I want to toss out to everybody today, particularly so Neil can get a feel for where you're coming from as an audience. Which social media platform does your content get the most shares on? Let's have you answer that poll question now. We'll be tallying the data faster than you can imagine, and Kate will chime in with some poll results so we can start to get a feel and a flavor for your big decision here that you need to make during the webinar. All right, we need a few more. We need a few more poll results.
This is Kate here.
We're going to close it off in a minute, so cast your vote, and off we go.
Hey guys, this is Kate here. Looks like just about everyone voted, so I'm going to share those results with you now. And it looks like most of you get the bulk of your shares on Facebook. Then LinkedIn, Twitter trailing behind. About 5% of you seeing great success on Instagram, and I'm interested to know what the 3% of you who wrote other are, so feel free to chat in what that other is if that's you. But back to you, Neil and Byron.
Thanks, Kate. That was great. So let's turn things over to Neil, really. Enough of an intro. Neil, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Byron, and thank you all for contributing to that poll. I'm wondering if that other was Pinterest. And I also wonder if we would have gotten very different results if we had asked you which social media platform drives the most traffic to your website. But that's going to be another poll for another webinar. I'm going to get started here. Social media tactics to amplify your content marketing. This is actually the first time I'm presenting solely on the topic of content marketing. Those of you who may not know me, I just show you this one slide which looks very confusing to the naked eye, but hopefully by the end of this 30-second introduction, it'll make a lot of sense. So I have been active in the social media space beginning as a blogger in 2008 and launching a social media strategy consultancy in January of 2010. And since then until now, I realized that what companies, what professionals need is a combination of strategy and education. And it's really the education part that I am passionate about. I consider myself an educator. And really the strategy and education is what drives me to do all the things you see below that. So I also am the co-founder of a conference that focuses on the technology of social media and best practices in utilizing it, called the Social Tools Summit. I teach social media not only at Rutgers University, but also for those of you joining us from Europe at the Irish Management Institute. I hope to be back in Dublin in May. I'm also the founder of Maximize Social Business, which hopefully has become or will become your social media for business resource. And I'm launching a new community for social media professionals and propagating best practices called the Social Media Center of Access. Also written 3 books. Really, this Maximize Your Social book is the culmination of all of my social media strategy consulting, and really the mission of that book is to help you create your own social media strategy through reading through the book. Now, I mentioned this is the first time that I'm speaking on content marketing, and what the approach I'm taking on content marketing is going to be an approach from the lens of social media. So I'm hoping this is very, very different from the other types of content marketing presentations you've heard, and it's really a preview of what I'll be presenting at in Las Vegas. So it's going to be really fast-paced. There's a lot of content. I prefer to overwhelm rather than underwhelm, but I also want to make sure we have questions at the end, and I'm going to follow up. You'll notice in the bottom here we do have that right on hashtag, so if I don't get to your question, throw it out with a hashtag, and I'll try to get back to you within 24 hours. All right, that's enough about me. Let's first, before we begin with this tactical advice, I want you to realize the role that content has from a social media marketing perspective. And I think this will give you a lot of insight as to how strategic content is in social, and therefore the different ways social is going to help you amplify it that I'm going to go through the rest of the presentation. So I like to call social media the convergence of information and communication. In other words, We used to go to social media for communication. We got back in touch with friends on Facebook. We would, get back in touch with ex-colleagues on LinkedIn. We'd message. We'd do Facebook chat. We might poke each other. But soon, these have transformed into social networks where we also go to for news and for information. And the more we go there for news and information, the more we find news and information, and we go back there, and it becomes our first place. And we see friends sharing links, and we begin to share links. And now we have this convergence. And really, this U.S. Airways plane landing on the Hudson is the watershed moment where CNN said, as reported on Twitter. Twitter originally being just a small social networking site for, people to keep in touch with each other when they're on their cell phone or smartphone. But obviously, these have changed. So with this convergence of information and communication, what I believe social media comes down to is very simple. And I'm a straight shooter. I try to give this all in a very, very simple, realistic, practical manner. It comes down to content and communication, right? Now, if you're a human, it's easy to communicate. Companies, it's a little bit harder to say, hey, how's your day? But it's the content part that's really important. So therefore, from a social media marketing and social media strategy perspective, content marketing strategy has always been an essential part of it ever since I started. Every single one of my clients, for instance, I've recommended a blog for various reasons. But this is how companies, especially those that are doing content marketing that are listening to this call, can naturally engage in social media marketing. It's like peanut butter and chocolate. They go well together. So interesting facts as well, it's not just Twitter, it's not just LinkedIn. People, even on these very, very casual social networking sites like Facebook, people are going there for news. Like half of Facebook users are going there for news. So more and more people consume content on these sites. That gives us as content marketers a better chance of finding a new audience for our content. It's a perfect storm. So I like to say that with this convergence, there are three distinct opportunities for everyone in this room. Now, obviously, I want to focus on the content marketing. So reaching out and engaging with your customers, prospects, partners, network, great, that's important. But really, it's this middle one, creating opportunity by communicating and sharing information. And when I talk about content curation, I think this will become more clear. But this is really the opportunity. People are looking for information. Feed them with information, right? And then, obviously, the third part is the whole listening aspect. Listening not only for reputation management, but also for new information, social, business intelligence that can generate leads for you. So, really want to focus on this middle part and the opportunity that creates for everybody. The problem, though, is that as a company, like I said, it's about content and communication. What the heck are you going to talk about in these channels where you're competing with people that have birth announcements, people talking about, go Pats, looking at the football game, people at a concert, who knows what's going on, and you have to compete with that audience, right? So, and I'm going to say it again in this webinar. Social media was made for people, not businesses. So you, as a business, as a content marketer, are always going to be at a disadvantage. Now, I'm going to give you a lot of tactical advice, but there's some philosophical advice. And this is one little bit of philosophical advice that I always want you to have in the back of your mind, that you're always at a disadvantage. You're playing on someone else's turf, and you need to be very, very careful and acknowledge that. And hopefully every bit of advice I give you is going to be aligned with this thought. But there's also something interesting with social media. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. This is universal. I always like to say social media replaces nothing but complements everything. Okay, so social media hasn't changed that, but the role of content actually reinforces this. And content, first of all, people get to know you because they do searches and they find you. This is especially relevant on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on searching for hashtags on Instagram, Pinterest, maybe not so relevant on Facebook because Facebook graph search never really delivered, although there is some functionality there. People begin to like you from your content, and from that you begin to build a community of people who like you from your content. And with consistency of posting, go to a Twitter handle that hasn't posted in 6 months and you figure that they've gone out of business, or go to one that is constantly posting good content that's getting a lot of engagement, and you can see how over time you can build trust with your audience as well. And this all happens from content. Content is the key. Now, I say content, and we all know, those of you that are from the content marketing space, there's a lot of different types of content, and there's a lot of different types of content that can come into play in social media. Starting with your status update to a link, a blog, a photo, video, infographic. We can go on and on and on. Those of you that are involved in content marketing know you don't need to have every type of format of content in your content marketing arsenal. But if you want to play on a maximum number of social media sites, you actually do, and I'll get into that in a moment. But just understanding the different types of content in play here. But in general, when you share content, I know content marketers, you have a webinar, an ebook, a blog post, and you just want to shoot out the title with a link. But really, for social media, there's a way of creating content for search engines, but there's a way of creating content for social media. And I'm going to go into this in a little bit more depth here, but I want to just give you some overarching truths, right? We asked you, what are the platforms that your content gets most shared on? The idea of social media is that you want things to go viral. It's a one-to-many. And that happens. I often get asked, Neil, do you place the most value on a like, a comment, or a share? It's the share, because that's reaching a new audience. It's the retweet, it's the repin, it's the repost. But in order to make that happen, you have to touch the hearts of people, right? And some easy to understand concepts here is, especially if you're a B2B company, it has to be resourceful. It ideally will be engaging, and it'll ideally be likable content and shareable content. And obviously the shareable, I think, is the most important thing. And we're hearing a lot more about this in the content marketing space. If you follow Mark Schaefer, who's obviously one of the top thought leaders in the space, no, we are not related. We just have two similar sounding last names and both teach at Rutgers. But it is this emotion. And I love this quote from the director of marketing from the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Actually, there's a lot of best practices that companies can learn from how nonprofits are doing their social media. The quote here is, the key to shareable content is evoking emotions. If people feel a strong emotion, they will feel compelled to tell the people they know about the experience. This says a lot about customer experience marketing, but it also talks a lot about the emotion that's conveyed in the content that you create and that you share in social media. And I'm going to go through a little bit, give you a little bit more tactical advice on how to do this in a bit here. So that's really, I want us all to be on the same wavelength of content's role in social media. And obviously content in social media is not just content marketing. You're playing in a landscape that is controlled by people, not by businesses. So let's move on. We have 5 topics to get through today. I want to get to the first topic, preparing your content for effective social promotion. I'm a fast talker. I want to have time for your questions. Byron, do we have any burning questions so far, or is everybody waiting for the next module here?
Well, I think we probably have quite a few, but I know I do. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is the importance of freshness when it comes to content. You're probably going to get to that, so I want you to carry on if so. But how important are sharing things that are fresh and new and offer insights that perhaps people have not seen before?
Well, freshness is important for a few things. From a tactical advice, some of the social networks have algorithms that control what you see in your newsfeed, i.e. Facebook's EdgeRank. And one of the things they look at, obviously, is recency. So that's obviously one point to consider. Another one is, and I'll talk about this, content is a commodity, right? How are you going to differentiate yourself from the other million content marketers out there? And one, strategic thing you can do is the freshness of your content. On the other hand, content on some social networks has a really, really long shelf life. Now, the challenge is when you have this brand new content, like here are the things that you should do in 2016. And then once 2017 comes around, you can't use that content anymore. So the idea really is to make content that's fresh and be able to rebrand it so it's fresh all the time or evergreen, right? So you have freshness as a tactic to gain people's attention, but ideally I would want to repurpose that into something that's evergreen, a two-prong approach. Hopefully that makes sense.
Indeed, thanks.
Awesome. All right, preparing your content for effective social promotion. Let's jump right into it. Social media today is very different than our mom and dad's social media. And I still run into companies that are in 2011 social media mode where, hey, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, we got it all covered. Well, you don't. It is as varied of an audience today as it has been. Not only visual-only networks, not only mobile-only networks, but if we go on the far right, we have, some of you may not even know some of these icons, but we have on the top there WhatsApp, in the middle WeChat, and on the bottom line there we have pure mobile messaging apps that are now turning into social media marketing platforms. We see this with WeChat in China and Asia. We see this with Line in Japan. I think it's only a matter of time before we see this with WhatsApp. I hear Facebook is going to open up a sort of a customer service channel through WhatsApp, but it's become, these sorts of mobile messaging applications have become social media marketing platforms themselves, and it requires us to engage in a very, very different way. So I really want to just open your mind that social media is probably very different than what you might conceive it to be, and therefore you need to be thinking of your content in a lot of different and new ways. So I'm just going to throw it out there on this slide, and this may be one of the few slides you may want to take a screen capture or a little picture with your iPhone from. But do you have your social formats covered? And if you want to amplify your content in social, it's going to require you not necessarily to repurpose, although part of this is repurposing, but also reformat. And let's begin with long-form content. And I know some of you are going to say, well, we have content. Should we also publish the same content on LinkedIn Pulse? Should we publish the same content as a Facebook note? Should we just copy and paste and put everything in as a Google Plus post? So I'm not going to cover the SEO aspects of this. This goes sort of above and beyond the objective of this webinar, and I'm not an SEO expert by any means. But if you want to get more exposure to your content, you want to become good friends with the social networks. And the best way of becoming good friends with social networks is to utilize their functionality to its fullest. And that means republishing your blog post on LinkedIn Post, on Pulse, or on Facebook Notes, or on a Google Plus page. Just something to think about. Or if you wanted to repurpose it, shorten it, whatever it might be, these are excellent channels for long-form content. We have videos. Well, if you've only been uploading your video to YouTube, you're missing out on Facebook. And we know that Facebook has gone through periods where they actually are, focusing on in the edge rank in the news feed. They seem to be giving priority to videos. These days it seems to be going to live streaming and groups, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But Facebook obviously is another area. Why not take those same videos, though, and shorten them? Instagram, Snapchat, Vine. We can take advantage of all these different platforms. Live video. I mentioned Facebook mentions. And not everybody can have access to it yet, but it's only a matter of time before everybody does have access to this. And obviously we have Periscope on Twitter. Only for live video, obviously. Photos. Photos is, I think, the universal thing outside of links, but even more universal than links that you can post on pretty much any social network. Presentations. Let's not forget about SlideShare, right? Links. Photos we can post anywhere. Links we can't really post on Instagram and Snapchat, can we? Although there are creative things we could do with the links in our bio and what have you. And then we have discussions, right? LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, Google Plus communities, and utilizing discussions to market our content. And maybe you've been successful doing that in LinkedIn groups. Well, have you been active or even experimented with Facebook groups with Google Plus community? So do you have all the different social formats covered that you need in order to engage in social to begin with? LinkedIn is a publishing platform, and I talked about Facebook and Google+. LinkedIn is really the huge one. LinkedIn is trying to become the Wall Street Journal of the business world. They bought out Pulse, which already had like 30 million downloads. If you are just publishing status updates on LinkedIn, you're not getting much visibility. If you're just posting from your company page and you're not sponsoring it, you're not getting much visibility. What's getting visibility right now in LinkedIn is LinkedIn Pulse. And this is just an example. This gentleman is a mobile marketer, just someone I happen to randomly find, and I'm like, how did this guy get so many views? This is someone who has a few hundred connections. He published on June 3rd, got a few hundred views. September 11th, a few hundred. September 17th, between 500 and 1,000. And then September 19th, he got more than 700,000 views for this post on Apple losing the global smartphone war to Google when Google announced Google One. And there's a lot of different things that go into this, but the potential there is huge. Even for a lot of small businesses, just getting a few hundred views on a blog post might be 2 or 3 times more than what they get on their own website. So free your content from your own website. Hopefully you understand content marketing requires you to really showcase your content everywhere. And, for some companies, blogging on LinkedIn may get more impressions. Now, whether it results in conversions or not is another story. But you might get more impressions for your content on LinkedIn than on your own website, especially if you're a small business. So I'm just going to throw it out there that is a platform that you shouldn't forget about. And then obviously, your content has to be repurposable. But when it comes to social media, it has to become even more repurposable, not just for those formats. And this is an example of my own repurposing formula. I think every content marketer must have this formula, and they're probably better at repurposing than social media marketers are. But just to give you an idea, you start with a podcast. A 20-minute podcast has like a 2,000-3,000 word transcript. From a 2,000 or 3,000 word transcript, maybe we create 4 different blog posts of 600 to 750 words. For every different blog post, we should have multiple status updates, and I'm going to get into that as well. So from there, we can create tens of status updates. Maybe we can repurpose this into an ebook, then an infographic, then we do a SlideShare. We can even now take the SlideShare and do a webinar, do a Google Plus Hangout, archive that on YouTube to the video, and maybe from the engagement we got in the audience and the questions, we can create a new follow-up ebook. This is how the repurposing is not just for the content marketing, but it overlaps what you need for social. And once you include these different components you need for social media in your content marketing repurposing, if you're doing that, which I hope you are, I think it's going to become a natural process for you, and you're really going to be able to leverage this and become very efficient at doing it. Are your headlines strong enough? Now, people are going through Twitter headlines, and I call these headlines, but what you see on tweets, right, or on Facebook posts, or wherever you are. People are inundated with this. Are your headlines strong enough? Writing a tweet and trying to get someone to click on the link is very different, as I said, from writing for Google search engines and trying to get people to click from a Google search result. So obviously, you need to make it clear what your post is about. But people are going to click through based on the strength of the headline. No matter how good your content is, if that tweet isn't good enough, you're not going to get the click through. So, it must be short. Obviously, when in Google terms, 65 to 70 words for title, or 65 to 70, characters for a title. But when we come to social media, it's very different. We can go with Twitter, we can go longer. We want to help others find it with hashtags, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And really, it should be catchy, right? Let's get down to the emotion. The emotion of not just shareable content, but the emotion of getting someone to actually pull the trigger and click on that tweet, click on that link, or whatever it might be. List questions, popular trends. I have a separate slide where I'll go into more of that. But it comes down to not just copying and pasting the title of your blog post because you imported it on an RSS feed and you're spewing it out everywhere. You really need to customize it if you want to get the best mileage for your content in social media. So, have you created multiple descriptions for posts? Marketers love A/B testing. Have you done A/B testing on your really strategic content by creating multiple tweets and seeing what works? When I talk about multiple tweets, sure, the original title is great. What about a question one? What was your biggest aha moment in Periscope, in using Periscope? And maybe that's something that if I'm interested in Periscope, I'm going to go, I wonder what other people thought. The negative question. This is the biggest mistake you're making in content marketing that's damaging your pipeline. Well, I want to know what that is, right? Numbered lists. The 67 crazy things that Periscope marketing can do for your brand. That's definitely clickbait. Quotes. Sometimes you have compelling quotes that people use as click-to-tweet sort of plug-in, and you have this quote that you want to really highlight. Social media replaces nothing but complements everything. Click to read more. Or a stat. 89% of marketers say live streaming is a waste of time. Whatever it is, these are things that from a tactical perspective, tend to do well as clickbait, and you want to have clickbait for your content so that it's actually exposed. You're not just sharing it, but actually people are clicking through, and ideally they're sharing that as well because you've created an emotional bond from the power of having these multiple descriptions and having great headlines in social media for your content. But there's another side, which is visuals, right? It kills me when I see blog posts that don't have visuals attached to them, so that when your fans want to share them in social media, there's no visual. We know, right? I don't need to give you the stats. We should all know that tweets with visuals and Facebook visuals, they all perform better than if you don't have visuals. So you want to make sure that every time you publish any type of content, especially blog content, you have a featured image. And what kills me is, I partner on events and webinars, and and you just have a landing page, you need to have images, right? Every type of content marketing you want to do in social media, you have to have an image, and maybe you have to create new images for it in order to best promote it. You also need to optimize the dimensions for the social network you want to share to. Twitter, Facebook, maybe 1200 by 600. On Instagram, maybe 600 by 600 or a square. But you need to understand those dimensions. You don't need to go overboard. With Pinterest, it might be 600 by 1200. But you want to create these standards. I'd say those are probably the 3 standards that I would use. I'd add a 575 by 125 for email and a 300 by 250 for a website widget. But for every piece of content you have, you need to basically create 5 different you need to create 5 visuals or 5 different size visuals. And if you wanted to create multiple visuals for each size, you can do that as well. And then really you need to ask yourself, I think there's 2 grand schemes in terms of visuals, which is, do you want to have visual eye candy like the little pink house, or do you want to have a text summary? And there's no one single right or wrong answer. It's going to depend on your product. It's going to depend on your branding, what have you. But you need to have strong visuals these days to make sure your content is the most effective it can be in social media. And for those of you that are blogging, and this really comes out of my blogging module at Rutgers when I teach on sort of the social media aspects of blogging. Obviously, it begins with creating resourceful and shareable content. Your blog should represent your social voice. It should be as aligned with the social user as any content you have on your website. It kills me, though, when I see content marketers, they want to take advantage of social, and yet they only have a share plugin for Facebook, and yet they're wondering why they're not getting any retweets. Or, they want people to use Buffer because they know that Buffer users tend to share content often and over multiple social platforms, but they don't have a Buffer button on their website. Well, guess what? You're primarily going to get shares only on those social networks that you have buttons for. So get all-in-one social share plugins and make sure you have all your social bases covered. Comment plugins for moderation. What's the difference between content marketing that's good for social as a blog post, bad for social as an article where people go to it and they can't engage with it? You want to get that engagement. Every engagement is a greater chance that you get additional touches, and it's going to help with your conversion and building community. And then obviously the visuals. And the visuals, just from a blog content perspective that go well in social, it's not just this cover image that I talk about, it's having other images embedded in the post. If you have SlideShares, it's embedding them and getting additional traffic. If you have YouTube videos, it's embedding them and getting additional traffic. If you have infographics, obviously you want to embed them wherever you can. In fact, I would have a goal of having one embeddable type of content in every single piece of blog content, and you can even embed these in interactive contents as well. Like you can embed YouTube videos in SlideShares and what have you. Not to sort of blow your mind with the potential there, but there's a lot of social media components that you should be adding to your own blog and website. Now, the visual thing is so important that we've seen, in essence, and this is Pew Internet Research, Pew Research Center, that outside of Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Instagram, and Twitter pretty much have about the same number of users. We do know that in terms of active monthly users, right now Instagram is number 2. They have superseded any of these networks. And the key thing about Instagram and of Pinterest and of Snapchat and of Periscope, Facebook mentions Vine, is that they're 100% visual, right? So you need to have what I call a visual voice. The visuals are key for so many reasons, right? Obviously, I already mentioned that the visuals help your content it just becomes more effective marketing in social media when you have a visual. There's a science behind this, and this quote I have here comes from way before social media, that 90% of all information transmitted to the brain is visual, and this information is processed 60,000 times faster than text. You need to have a visual voice. If you're a consumer-facing brand, a lot easier. A lot of you I know in content marketing are B2B brands, but I have some advice for you. I had the pleasure of speaking at the headquarters for Maersk Line, a big shipping company in Copenhagen, Denmark. I had a chance to meet their head of social media, Sahar Monavari, and they face the same struggle that all of you do as well. We're an industry leader in a boring industry, but we never had a face. And a lot of you might not have a face as well. But on the other hand, they realized that their containers were everywhere. So they embarked on a strategy that actually won them a year later a European Digital Marketing Industry Award for their program. And you can actually go to their Facebook page and look at the different categories of their photo albums. And they basically divided them into these categories. They have the containers. Containers come in all sorts of different sizes and shapes, right? But they have the terminals where those containers go to. They have the vessels that carry the containers. They have the ports of call where the containers go to. They have a history of the company. It goes back to the 19th century. So, if there's history buffs out there, it's pretty fascinating. They talk about the management of the team as well, but they also talk about, the energy efficient containers they have. They also are very active at reposting photos they find on Instagram, which has become a tactic of a lot of successful social media marketers that I think content marketers should be utilizing as well. So this is only one way. Every B2B company is going to have to find their way here, but if you want to post something on Instagram, you need to have a visual voice. And you'll notice that I did not include quotes here. I'm personally not a big fan of quotes, and I think those B2B brands that fall into the trap of just posting quotes, if content is a commodity, boy, you're not differentiating yourself at all from anyone else. So you may want to think twice about that strategy and really think visual, not text-based visual, but visual. So what will your visual voice look like? Product photos, behind-the-scenes images, user-generated content from fans is probably the best one if you get them. Snapshots of your employees' selfies is a popular one. Images from events is a great one. Holiday-related images. Quotes or memes, I'll throw it up there. It shouldn't become the primary thing, but it's something you can fall back to, especially when they're quotes from your employees. How-to videos we can throw up there, or videos in general. Throwback Thursday, if your company's been around for a while, that's a popular one. And campaigns. Chats, tag a friend, sweepstakes, hashtag contest is primarily Instagram, but hopefully this gives you some ideas for your visual voice. And I think this is the last slide. Oh, okay. I got 2 more bits of tactical advice here. And you can see how this webinar is going really, really fast, even though I'm really, really trying to talk fast to get through all the content. Do you have a hashtag strategy? Okay. I want you to realize that more than ever, I think hashtags, originally content marketers approached them as pure SEO. I want you to realize I believe, and I've seen this over the last 6 to 12 months, and I use a lot of social media tools, and a lot of other marketers do as well. Hashtags are quickly becoming the default way in which people search for content on Twitter, I believe. And it's becoming a default way for content to get discovered by others that use these tools. And therefore, I think that we should be going strong with a hashtag approach to Twitter. Obviously, if you're on Instagram, hashtags are the only way to search for content on Instagram. So I want you all, if you haven't, 2016 is a year to research and own your hashtag or hashtags. And really, in social media marketing, we call this share of voice, where, how many times was Coca-Cola mentioned versus Pepsi? I want you to do a share of voice, or, when people are tweeting out that hashtag, who are the people that are tweeting out the most? Who is getting the most retweets from that content, and what have you? And I want you to get into that top 25 or top 50, whatever it is. You're also going to use that research to reach out to influencers and brand advocates as well. But I really want to make sure you have that strategy in place for your content. It's really going to help it. And for Instagram, those hashtags obviously are probably going to be a little bit different than what you have in social media or on other social media sites like Twitter. Finally, are you repeating your content enough? Byron asked about the freshness of content. And freshness is important, but it kills me when I see content marketers post once and forget about it, because you know what? You need to post more than once. You need to repeatedly post things. You need to sort of hit people over the head sometimes with things, because not everyone is on every social network at the same time. We're creatures of being active on multiple social platforms throughout the day. We miss things, so it's okay to repeat yourself. This is the famous slide from Guy Kawasaki where he basically repeated a tweet every, I believe, 60 minutes. He repeated it 3 times. This is the number of clicks he got on a minute-by-minute basis, and you see these big spikes are when he tweeted it, and then they go down over time. So when you tweet things again or repeatedly, you get more and more clicks for your content. I would recommend, Maximize Social Business. I have blog posts going back from 2008. Not all that content is fresh for today, but for those things that I think are still relevant, I will absolutely go back and repost those on a regular basis, repeatedly. And I find when I do that, I get more and more and more exposure for my content and more click-throughs and more website traffic. So it's something that if you're not doing enough of, you should, and really gather together. And it's not just blog posts, it's ebooks and webinars. And boy, Writer Access is 69 webinars. That's, if you were just to post those twice a day, it would take you a month to get through not all of them, but a majority of them. That's a great beginning to an editorial content calendar for social media, for content marketing, assuming all those webinars are still relevant today. The what is content marketing, though, may still be because it's evergreen, and there's always newbies trying to get into the space. All right, Byron, so in order to give enough time for Q&A, I have 5 minutes left to get through the remaining 4 concepts. The idea of this webinar really was to give you a sneak preview of my speech in Vegas and entice all of you to come out and have fun at the Content Marketing Conference. Byron, should I do a quick preview of a few points for each of the sections and then give 10 minutes for Q&A? What do you recommend?
Keep going. It's just too fabulous not to want to absorb it all. We'll get a few questions in, and I'll go right to the audience and skip my own questions and get a few key ones answered. So keep going. Go ahead.
Okay. And this was meant really a subset, so I had more content that I had to delete out. But anyway, all right, content creation. I'm going to try to spend just a few minutes in each of these concepts. The importance of content creation and how to find content to curate. Once again, social media made for people, not for businesses, right? So it's all about what do they want to hear? What does the social media want to hear? What do they look for on Twitter versus looking for on Google? Which normally is news and what have you, or in a LinkedIn group or whatever it might be. So we always have to think of the user. We're always hearing that our content marketing has to be customer-centric. And, there is no greater truth for that than in social media. And here's the thing, right? Well, this is an example of a social media calendar. But, if you have an editorial calendar, you blog once a week, and maybe you have an event once a month, what are you going to talk about every day? If you want to send out a few tweets a day because you want to be heard, what are you going to talk about, right, when you don't have that much content? Now, obviously, you can be rebroadcasting all the content you already created, which I'm going to recommend as well. But this is where content curation comes in, where you're not just talking about yourself all the time. You're actually talking about things that people want to hear. And that's where you build trust with the social media user, that you're not a self-promoter and that you're resourceful and that you're always sharing shareable content. And it's going to help. It indirectly helps your content marketing, right, by helping your username, your Twitter name, or whatever it might be, get shared out there, building a stronger bond with the user who's sharing it, and it's going to increase the chances that your content gets shared as well. And also, we know that content curation is an important tool for establishing thought leadership. That goes without saying. And this is especially true for B2B. If you're a consumer-facing brand, I think a lot of the content you're going to create is probably going to come from your fans, and that seems to be a successful strategy for a lot of companies. Now, there's a lot of rules out there. I used to have Joe Polizzi's rule up here, the 6-1 run or the 3-1-1 rule. I decided to make my own rule because I really think in social media, ideally, you are sharing as little of your content as possible and sharing as much of other important people's authoritative content as possible. And the reason is I just think this is going to be more effective, that people are going to be more tuned in to your content when you post because you're not posting all the time, and it naturally fits into everything else that you post. So what would that look like? What would the 911 rule look like? So the title of this module is finding content that's, finding content to complement your own content. The content of others. I call this leverage the other. Advocates, influencers, customers, partners, fans. I mean, they're really sort of similar to advocates. There's a lot of people that you can cull from your content creation efforts that is a natural win-win. Now, the one I would say is sort of the primary content. This hopefully is your resourceful content. And yeah, if you have an event, a webinar, an ebook, something that directly affects or directly leads people into the marketing funnel versus the indirect blog post, I think that's great as well. If it fits in, if it's and if you do your titles correctly with some emotion, as I talked about before, I think it's only going to help you become more effective there. So, sources of content curation, real simple. Advocates, who are your fans? They're already sharing your content. Hopefully they are. Why aren't you sharing more of their content? If it's authoritative, if it meets your content curation needs and your content strategy and what have you. It makes total sense. Influencers, this is a no-brainer. Customers, partners. And I think that there's other approaches to this, But I think this is going to be the best because, look, when you're on, and I use Twitter as an example, but when you're on Twitter, you're in a room of 400 million people. If you're not tagging on people's shoulders, no one's going to listen to you. By tagging on someone's shoulder, by sharing their content with a via app, that's where the magic starts. That's where people notice you. They notice that you're sharing. And we're humans, right? I tend to share content from people that share my content because I'm human. And, when you share someone else's content and they never, recognize your existence, as a human being, it doesn't feel good, right? So why not share more of the content, if it's good content, of the people that support you? And that's going to be an important message when I talk about supporting, sharing content of influencers as well. Every one of you should be a subscriber of BuzzSumo Pro. You can share proven content. This is another strategy. Share the content that's already popular. It's already been vetted. What is going to be content that's popular that people want to read? Go through the data, and I'm a big fan of data-driven approach, not just to content marketing, but to social media marketing in general. There's a keyword-based curation approach. Obviously, I'm the co-founder of the Social Tools Summit, so I know a lot about a lot of different tools out there. I'm going to introduce a lot more at Content Marketing Conference, obviously. But this is just one of them called DrumUp, which is there's a lot of different curation tools out there. DrumUp seems to work really good from a keyword-based approach. So you put in your keywords, it creates a feed, and you can approve or not approve. If there's certain sites that you don't want to share content from, like your competitors, this is one example, you can put that in as well. So, just an example of a keyword-based curation approach. There's also the RSS-based curation approach. This is Market Hub. These are feeds of sites or people that more than often share my content, that are on my radar, that I consider my brand advocates. So when I look for content to share, I go to their RSS feeds first, and Market Hub is a really intelligent platform that allows me to easily do that. And these things are all 100% pre-approved by me. I'm not just automating this completely. These are just creating cues for me to easily approve curated content. All right, that was the second concept, and I'm going to need to go a little bit faster here. We have 4 minutes left to go through 3 more concepts. Leveraging paid social. Yes, you need to pay to play. Content is a commodity. It's supply and demand. It totally is. It's not just that the human brain has its limitations. It's our attention spans have limitations. Your screen size has limitations. The Facebook news feed has limitations. It's all limited. So it's a commodity. Everyone's doing content marketing. You're not unique just because you have a blog. And if you thought you're the first one to blog about something, do a Google search, and chances are for any given topic, there's already been a few authoritative blog posts written about it. So how do you sort of get seen? And this is where paid social comes in. A Facebook Japan advertising salesperson that I know says when he talks to customers, he refers to it as a fast pass, right? If you've ever been to Disneyland, you can go to Disneyland, spend $100, and get to ride on 6 rides and spend 10 hours waiting in lines. Or you can spend an additional $100 and get to go on 5 more rides and spend a lot less time in lines. You can have a better experience. Paid social is the fast pass for social media. And I consider it a spigot. When I want to get more people for a webinar, when I want to get more ebook downloads or whatever, when I want to get more traffic for a blog post, whatever it is, paid social is the spigot that at any point you can turn on and get it. And it's not just that it's a general spigot and a golden spigot. And in this way, it helps the effectiveness of your social media and content marketing program. It helps you to meet those KPIs, but it also allows you to handpick your audience because we can micro-target all this, and it guarantees that you're going to be seen, right? You'll be seen out of those 400 million people to the people that matter. And that's something you can't do on Google or any other place but on social media. So I'm a big fan of paid social. And obviously, if we want to defeat EdgeRank, and this is specific to Facebook, or if we want to be seen on any given timeline, this is what we need to do. Look, $20, I might be able to reach, from 2,500 to 6,600 very, very targeted people for this, live content marketing best practices blog post, should I want to share it. And I'm not going to go through all the micro-targeting options. Hopefully you all know these, but it is amazing the things you can micro-target, especially when we look in the interest, we look at the behaviors, when we look into the more demographics. If I want to sell autos, I can find people that have been digging around on auto sites recently. If I want to target people that make a lot of charitable donations, I can micro-target them. Whatever it is, political affiliation, ethnic affinity, generation, you can target them. And from a privacy perspective, it scares the heck out of me, in all honesty. But from a marketing perspective, it is second to none. And I believe those companies that leverage this are way ahead of those that don't. And it's not just Facebook. It's LinkedIn, it's Twitter, what have you. And, paid social's mainstream. This is a Social Baker survey from a little while ago. 92% of 265 social media marketers were already advertising on Facebook. It's a no-brainer. So if you haven't experimented or done enough paid social with your content marketing, I urge you to do so. And I'm going to say this about Facebook. Facebook is becoming an old person's network. It's becoming more and more professional. And here's an example of a promoted post on employee advocacy and social selling on Facebook that got, 14 shares, a few hundred likes from spending a little bit of money on promoting it. So your community is out there. You need to find them, and paid social is a great way to find them and to bring them into your community where you're going to get maximum leverage for your content marketing. And by the way, Facebook ads are still relatively cheap when compared to other traditional mediums. I'll go through that really quickly here. We're out of time, Byron. I'm just going to do this really quickly. Two more things. Engagement with social influencers, not so fast. Companies make tons of mistakes dealing with influencers, and once you make a mistake, first impressions are everything. I want you to think of it this way, and I'm going to go into influencer marketing more in Las Vegas. We all know why influencers are important. 92% of people trust people. 92% of people trust recommendations from people they know more than anyone, right? We know that to be a truth. And it's the same with B2B. 60% of B2B buyers look at peer reviews. And we know, the stats are that B2B buyers, before they contact you, they're already 75% into the buying cycle just by doing research of content online, and often that content comes from social media. But before you reach out to influencers, I want you to practice with brand advocates, because anyone can be an influencer, right? I know CEOs of companies that have like 100 Twitter followers, but they're extremely influential, not necessarily just on social media. Your brand advocates are also your low-hanging fruit, because you already have affinity with them. They have affinity with you, right? And it's going to be a good practice working with external social users, because the way you work with influencers is very different than when you work with other people. Let's start out with brand advocates. We know the stats say that they're 83% more likely to share information if they're not already sharing it. Where are they? What networks are they on? Where are they engaging with you? How are they engaging with you? Are they already sharing your message? Create these lists, Twitter lists, Google Plus circles. Bring them in the LinkedIn groups. Follow them on Pinterest, Instagram, wherever they may be. Monitor them for engagement opportunities. Send social signals, right? Follow them, like them, comment. These are critical things to help you establish a deeper connection. And once again, if you're looking for content to curate, why not start with your fans? If that content meets your standards and it helps you meet your content marketing objectives. And then build relationships. If you build relationships with them, you can launch a formal program. And then when you launch a formal program, I actually want you to make your brand advocates, if you work with them well enough, you can make them influencers. Right. That's really I want you to make your brand advocates influencers, and I want you to make influencers brand advocates. And sorry, more to come at the Content Marketing Conference in Las Vegas. I could go, and any of these topics I could go on for probably an hour apiece, and obviously I can't today. Leveraging the social reach of your employees, employee advocacy. One thing I want you to remember about this is your organization is, if you have thousands of employees, your organizations have thousands of websites, not just one. Employees are the long tail of your brand identity. And there's a lot I could say about employee advocacy, your employees, your trusted resource, Prudential Financial, 15,000 employees, 160 connections per employee. If everybody was to share a message, it could potentially reach 2.4 million LinkedIn connections. Doesn't always work that way, but we know that when our employees, and I think this is especially true for social selling if you're in B2B, when our salespeople or our employees share content, it gets more conversion. There's very little overlap between the networks of our employees and our branded accounts. And there's a lot of advice I could give you here, but consider asking your salespeople, and you did this when you look for content ideas. If you're in B2B, what are the questions your salespeople get asked, right? If you all know the sales line, Marcus Sheridan, this is where you start. Well, why not use that for your content creation as well? Sometimes your salespeople might be sharing content that you don't even know about it. But the key thing here is that social selling, if you're thinking of employee advocacy, begin with your sales team. Social selling requires content to bridge the gap. Salespeople need content to share to showcase the expertise of your company. So that's where you should start. And this is an example. I do a lot of social selling trainings. One of my clients, recently I posted a picture about technology and replacing teachers. It's an e-learning company. It got reposted, and it's resulting in a partnership. This happened on LinkedIn with an organic photo this person took. Why not feed your sales team with the content that they need so that they can help generate more leads? And obviously it's going to help your content marketing. I'm going to end with this slide that for everything you do, and I touched upon some of these, right? And whether it's content marketing, anything you do in social media, it's going to come down to a combination of things: people, process, paid, and tools. And I say this because paid social really is a critical component, but I also want you to remember the people, the quality of people. And obviously, I'm a customer writer access because I believe in the content marketing services, sphere of things or companies. I believe they have really, really high quality content, and that's going to be key to make sure that your content marketing is effective. So you want to make sure you have the right people, and if you don't, you want to leverage outsourcing as well as you can. You want to have a great process. Now you need to reformat, repurpose different social networks, different sizes, different headlines. You need a process in place to manage that. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy, and you're not going to get ROI from your content marketing. The paid and then the tools are going to help you become really effective. I'll be talking more about tools at Content Marketing Conference and obviously at the Social Tools Summit as well. So if you want to get the full scoop on everything I was going to talk about in the presentation, you'll have to see me at the Content Marketing Conference in Las Vegas this May. I don't know if we have any time for questions, but Byron, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Terrific. Neil, that was just a fantastic presentation. I'm going to go right to some questions to give us all some more knowledge. Talking about the importance of images, and by the way, I personally love that, but Kate had a question, not our Kate, but another Kate in the audience, our fan base here. Does Neil have any thoughts on using stock images?
I sometimes use stock images. I think the challenge, I think it depends on the network. So I see companies using stock images for blog posts, for LinkedIn Pulse images. I think some of them can work great. There's some networks that are more professional, like LinkedIn, where that goes over well. There's some like Instagram where it will absolutely backfire on you. So you need to understand that each social community is different, and you need to experiment. I think one great way of doing it, in social media marketing, we say listen before you start. Look around at, what are images of your competitors, or, excuse me, when you do a search for a hashtag that seem to get a lot of engagement. Recently for a client, I had to take these slides out. I plan on showing them in Las Vegas, but they are a retailer, so their competitors were like Target and Nordstrom and Sephora. And I did a visual voice audit, and you can actually see the different types of the different components that go into the visual voice of every company. And definitely this particular company was still relying not just on stock images, but on advertising images that they would use for the web, and they were just not getting any engagement where their competitors were getting all the engagement. So you need to do a visual voice audit, but for some areas, I honestly think the stock photo can still get you some mileage, assuming that it's a good stock image that matches the content in your branding.
Great question here from Wes. Do snarky comments have a place in social media for a consultancy business, or should we play it safe?
Wow. My favorite case study on comments is Buffer. We all know the application Buffer. What a lot of you don't know is Buffer started out by commenting on a lot of blogs, including my own Maximize Social Business. And their target user was the blogger at the beginning. Obviously, they had Buffer set up, but they realized that bloggers are creators of content or sharers of content, but they can also propagate Buffer by adding a Buffer button to their blog. So that was their strategy that ended up becoming very, very successful. They ended up creating a network of brand advocates, including myself, and there they are today. So blog commenting has a role. I think that it comes down to when you are commenting, you're on someone else's turf. Some people or companies might just delete out that blog comment if you're not careful. I think it's okay that you need I call that a voice, right? You have a visual voice and a textual voice. That's your textual voice. If you're really snarky, that's great. The problem is that, you don't know that someone might misunderstand or take a different message from your comment if you're not careful. So I would rather play it safe. I would rather have something resourceful. I mean, I could have gone through the presentation and just shown 20 images, but I wanted to give away my content to entice you to come to the Content Marketing Conference and follow me on Twitter, what have you. So there's a lot of different angles there. But the snarky comment, I've only seen it work well a few times. You can create very passionate fans from that, but you can also turn off a lot more people from that. So I would be a little bit more careful. But at the end of the day, if your CEO is snarky, if you're all snarky, and if that's how you get customers, that's your brand, go with it.
And just a quick follow-up on that, have a listen to a podcast that I did with Brian Kramer, the author of Human to Human, regarding the snarky comment. We need to be human. Wouldn't you agree with that? We need to show our emotions and our passions and express ourselves. I'm not sure if snarky fits with that, but do you have a quick thought on our passion when it comes to our comments and our content in general?
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked about that emotional aspect that's going to help you, differentiate, be heard, create a bigger emotional bond. So, but I believe that you need to humanize your brand in social media, but it doesn't mean you need to sound, for lack of a better word, stupid. So, I think it's a different frame of thought, a different form of operating. I think some of the best brands that look like Taco Bell, as a case study, some of the things they put on look very organic, but they actually every week have 12 different people decide on an editorial calendar the week before they actually post things in social media. So the best brands make it look very organic and very human, but there's actually a lot of thought that goes into it. So don't forget that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, the more in the past brands wanted to create distance between themselves and people, you want to break out, you want to break away from that and really break down that barrier. But you also need to be true to your brand. And, I remember there was I worked with a utility company, and there was a power company, I forget, it was somewhere on the East Coast, where all of a sudden, they had an intern saying, hey, everyone, I'm really happy to be, manning the social media accounts today. Let me know if you have any questions. And this is for a company that was fighting power outages. And you can imagine the backfire that happened, and that person did not last long in that position. So you need to be true to your brand, and you need to be serious about it. And you need to really think twice and take a deep breath, especially when you get emotional. But if it's a positive emotion, if it's an emotion that's not going to potentially turn people away, if no one knew anything about your company, would you want that comment to represent your company's brand? Do you think that's going to help attract the type of customer you're looking for? I think that's really the defining thing in terms of how you want that voice to be. Are you still there, Byron?
Yes, sorry about that. I had my mute button on. I was
No
talking
worries.
a mile a minute. A few more rapid-fire questions, maybe quick answers on these so we can get through a few more. Can you recommend a tool for creating text summary on images?
No, the best tool is a human eye. There's some things that I recommend tools for, some that I don't. I know that there's a lot of innovation going on in that space. I know of companies that have technology where if your brand was pictured but not mentioned, it can actually find that in an analysis. But I don't know of any tool that I would recommend that would create a textual description from a visual.
Another question from Kate again. A visual voice audit. Does Neil have any blogs or any content that speaks to what that is or how to do an audit?
Coming soon.
Excellent. I'm glad you heard that question. It's a really good one, and I think people would be quite fascinated about it. What about applying?
Actually, you know what? My apologies. I don't talk about a visual voice audit, but recently on Maximize Social Business, I did publish a post on 7 steps to creating a stunning visual voice on Instagram, which is the first time I've talked about the concept and really 7 things you should look at in more depth. So go to MaximizeSocialBusiness.com, and I just published that a few days ago.
Cool. What about applying these things to selling physical products? Any tips?
Yeah, I don't see where it's any different.
Listen to the presentation again. Here's a tip.
Yeah.
Listen to the entire presentation again. I mean, it's an open-ended question. It's hard to be specific.
I think that, and Byron, you're probably more of an expert on this than I am, that e-commerce companies sometimes miss the boat with content marketing, and there's a tremendous amount of things they can do to help promote their product in an indirect way to get more visitors to their website. So, my advice for if you're in that boat is really leverage all this. From a visual perspective, sure, there's a lot you can do with your product. If it's a tangible product from a brick and mortar store, it's going to be a lot easier for you to create that visual voice, obviously, than if it's not. But I would go back and do a re-listen, and if there's still questions, using that right-on hashtag, please let me know.
And a wonderful overall theme to answer that question is forward-thinking companies are thinking like publishers, gathering ideas, developing stories, and publishing a steady stream of content that engages their readers and keeps them coming back for more. There's a lot in that statement, but I think I've said it probably 1,000 times in my content marketing discussions. That's what our obligation is. That's where this is all going. So hopefully that helps. Let's look at just one or two more. Let me see. What is your definition of brand advocate, and how do you find them?
Well, I consider them people that are advocating the brand, or a simple way of looking at them are fans. And I think the easiest way, customers aren't necessarily advocating for your brand unless they're happy customers, but from a social media perspective, who's a member of your community, who's following you, who is engaging with your content, and ideally, who's sharing your content, who's written a recommendation about your company in G2 Crowd or on Yelp, a positive recommendation, obviously. I believe that those are your advocates. So there's a few different ways of finding them. I talked about BuzzSumo Pro as a way, if you have content that's being shared by others, that's the easiest way to find, especially on Twitter, who those people are that are sharing your content. That's really where you start. And I don't think that there's a tool necessarily that's going to help you here. It comes down to, doing a manual search through and putting the dots together, because, every company that's been active in social already has brand advocates without knowing it. And I want you to really, find those people and celebrate them and create a relationship with them that I think is going to be mutually beneficial. And that's going to help you, reach that leveraging influencers phase. But I do believe the brand advocacy phase is the first phase you should go through for that.
This is maybe a good one to end on, because I think it's a big challenge for you and for, I guess, myself as well to potentially answer it. As a B2C home improvement retailer, getting unbranded content to share is difficult. Any thoughts on that?
Great question. Clients I've worked with have actually reached out to the companies that they sell and asked them for content that they can share. A lot of times, a lot of these companies actually have content. If not, maybe you need to teach them on content they should be creating. You can also ask them, are there things that can we share your photos or things in social? If you're like a home improvement, maybe some of the content comes down to home improvement ideas. Maybe some of the ideas are curated from your customers. Maybe you have a contest. Hey, what's your greatest home improvement tip? I don't care what industry you're in. I think that there's still a treasure trove of potential content that you can create from thinking outside of the box, and hopefully that gives you a few different ideas there.
Okay, one more question. I just can't help myself. It's another interesting one. How do we, as writers, take advantage of social media in our writing?
Great question. Obviously, you should be standing on the shoulders of giants. If you are doing writing and someone has already written about the topic and it's performed well, or it has very, very high Google search rankings, why not refer to that content or leverage that content as part of your own content? And I think that most clients, it's a best practice in content marketing, like for blogging, that you have not only internal links but external links, and you are linking to relevant and authoritative content. So I think that's the no-brainer. I often, when I work with writers, have to teach them how to do that. If you could do that on your own, I think that your clients are going to be very, very pleased. But also for content ideas. And I tell this to companies for their content marketing. Do BuzzSumo Pro is a great example, but you can just do a Twitter search for this given hashtag. What seem to be the things that are getting the most retweets, or the things that seem trending? And that's going to give you a lot of great ideas that is very, very different than searching Google for ideas. It's going to be more real-time. It's going to be a very, very different result, and I think that's a great way of researching topic ideas in addition to those external links. Those are the two best. And also, when you research social media, and I talk about Twitter a lot because that's where I think most content creators are most active, you find people that might be able to contribute, and this is a great way of reaching out to advocates and influencers as well, people that might be able to contribute content to your writing as well. And when influencers or advocates contribute to your content, they also tend to share that content. It's a very, very popular topic. And I didn't want to get into that because as someone that's seen influential in social media, I mean, every day I get a few of these requests. And if I don't have a relationship with you, I just ignore it because it's become spam. So reaching out to influencers is becoming another type of commodity these days. And I want to teach you best practices, and therefore I want you to start small with brand advocacy and then come to Las Vegas and we'll talk more about influencer marketing there.
Neil, I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Byron. I hope you all appreciate that. Each one of these 5 topics I probably could have talked about for half an hour, so I sort of overcommitted. But as I said, I'd rather overwhelm you than underwhelm you. Go back through the recording when you get the link in slow play, and hopefully if you have any questions, I'm going to be monitoring that right on hashtag, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer.
Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to this month's webinar. We hope to see you next month for our 70th webinar. Thanks for tuning in, and once again, thanks to Neil for the great insights and enlightenment. See you next month.
Thanks, everybody.